Greetings! I hope you're well. Welcome back to the Spirit Walker channel. I apologize for not putting out a video in a few weeks, in a very long time. I actually received some emails asking for more videos, and I was looking at this particular topic, which is the topic of the Gnostics, or the topic of Gnosticism, and their view of the world, their view of cosmology and cosmogenesis, and basically how do the Gnostics explain everything that has happened to humanity, and how humanity has been created, and how the solar system has been created. This is a fantastic story. And the first thing that I wanted to say is that it is very confusing, because you see the Gnostics talking about things, talking about the galaxy, and talking about the Milky Way, and talking about the solar system in one particular way. Then you see Spiritism has a completely different view. Then you see the Law of One, they have yet another view. And the Urantia book has another view yet. And then, so Buddhists and Christians and Jews and Muslims, etc., they all have their own traditions, and everywhere you go, you see a different story. And the whole thing is really very confusing. Which one do you believe? So the first thing that I wanted to say is that confusion is good. Confusion is a fantastic thing. Confusion means that you are searching. Confusion means that you are asking the questions. I strongly believe that humanity, in the state of development that we are now, we are not supposed to have the answers. We don't have the intelligence, the ability, the perception to understand what is really going on. So I think that if you are out there and you think that you know what's going on, you're probably deluded. You probably belong to one of these cults that the Christian cults or Muslim cults, where if someone has a different view from you, you're going to say, well, that's because you're going to hell. And because you have a different view from me, I am justified in chopping your effing head off. So these are the people that have certainty. These are the people that are deluded and have views in their head that don't correspond to reality, but they insist in saying, yes, I know everything. So if you are as dumb as that, I am really sorry for you. So basically what we should have at this stage, if you are honest, if you are a true seeker of the truth, you should be confused. So this is the first. So confusion is good. Confusion means that you are doing your homework as a human being, which is to try to expand your consciousness somehow. And you're not going to expand your consciousness by having false truths, by having dogmas, and by threatening other people that have different ideas from you. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to say is that the Gnostics, they come up with a very, very weird story about how our solar system has been derived. And the story, I would have let this pass, and I wouldn't have had another look at the story of the Gnostics, except that the Vatican tried to stop the Gnostics with violence, which is the normal modus operandi of the Vatican, because they're all Satanists, they're all pedophile Satanists. And so the Vatican, if you go back to your history books and you look at the history of the Cathars in France and how the Vatican decided to annihilate, it was true genocide, how the Vatican decided to annihilate the Cathars, and also the Albigenses, the Crusades against the Albigenses. If you look at that, you see that the Vatican, or someone, or some force, some demonic force at the Vatican, was pretty pissed off with the Gnostics. And just because of that, I decided to pay attention to the Gnostics, because if you want to be a good person in life, you should do exactly the opposite of what the Vatican tells you. So if you want to know, if you're in doubt about a question, just look at the Vatican. Whatever they're doing, do the opposite. And that's going to be good for you, because the Vatican is a Satanist political group that is associated with non-terrestrial entities, non-terrestrial demonic entities, and this much is known. And the popes and cardinals and all of that stuff, they are Luciferian Satanists. They do horrendous things in that den of thieves and demons called the Vatican. So the fact that the Vatican tried their utmost to silence and crush the Gnostics suggested to me that I should go and investigate what the Gnostics did and what the Gnostics proposed. And here I am very thankful for a scholar called John Lamb Lash, who's an American scholar, and he has studied the Gnostic texts, the Nag Hammadi texts, and which also known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he came up with the story of the Gnostics, the story of the creation of humanity according to the Gnostics. And he introduced the expression the Archons to our current lexicon. And given that, and he needs to receive the credit for all of that. And since then, a whole range of other researchers, such as the researchers that I respect deeply, such as David Icke, Robert Stanley, Mark Passio, Jordan Maxwell as well. So all of these guys, and Jay Widener as well. So all of these guys have adopted the language of the Archons, although there is no real consensus about what the Archons are. Say, for example, John Lash suggests that the Archons are what we today know as the reptilians and the Greys. If you go and talk to David Icke, he will have a very similar view. In contrast, if you just go and talk to a researcher such as Robert Stanley, he will suggest, he is of the view that the Archons are actual interdimensional beings. They're not necessarily the Greys and the lizards, but they are interdimensional beings. So they are things like formless plasma type beings, and I'm putting some of the photos that he suggests are the Archons. And he suggests that the Archons are these blobs of energy, and that the reptilians and the Greys, they follow these intelligent blobs of evil energy. So basically no one knows what the Archons are. Some researchers have suggested that, for example, the Archons could be the artificial intelligence that is worshipped by the lizards and the Greys. So, you have a range of different views, different opinions. And I am going to put out a video in the future talking about all of this confusion and what we can derive out of that, because it's okay to be confused, but out of the confusion you get a set of core beliefs that we know are rock solid, and we can rely on these beliefs, and everything else is more about research. It's more about smoothing out the edges of your knowledge in a way that you have a bigger picture, but they don't interfere into this core knowledge, the core set of knowledge that we should all know. So I'm going to put out a video in the future relating to that. But now let's go to the story of the Archons, and the story of, or more importantly, the story of Gaia Sophia, or Sophia. Now, I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to discuss with you why I think that this story needs to be taken seriously, not as gospel, if you're part of the pun, because the part of the Nag Hammadi texts are known as the Gospels of the Gnostics. So I'm going to tell you the story. You should not necessarily take that as the true and the absolute truth, but you should take that in the basket of possibilities that you have in your mind regarding the origin, the possible explanations for the origin of our solar system and our species. All right, so let's go ahead. So the whole story starts with the Aeons. The Aeons are described by the Gnostics as being gods. So gods with maybe a small g, because they are gods, they are beings, they are intelligent beings of energy, pure energy, and they are represented by the Gnostics as being similar to snakes of energy. And this is very important. I'm going to come back to that later on in a moment. Snakes of energy, or clouds of energy that have a snake-like form. And this is very, very important that you remember this. We're going to come back to this view, this description. And they live in the center of the Milky Way. They live in the center of the galaxy. So the story of the Gnostics, in contrast, for example, with the story that you see, the cosmogenesis that you see in the Law of One, which deals with the entire known universe. The story of the Gnostics is a relatively local story. It's a story of our galaxy. It's the story of our local Milky Way. And this is very important that we start from that point. So the idea here is that the Aeons, whatever they are intelligent beings of pure energy, possibly or a manifestation of what the Law of One calls intelligent energy. And these beings, they are not the God of the universe. They are not the ultimate creator. They seem to be created beings as well. So that's a very important distinction. But what happens is that these beings, they create biological experiments. So what they do is that they create experiments and they send out these experiments through the arms of the galaxy, and they allow these experiments to evolve. And when they create these experiments, they do not interfere on the experiments anymore. So they just let the experiment to evolve in a way that has no interference from them, but they did create everything. So one of these Aeons, or actually two of these Aeons, One of them was Sophia, or Sophia, and this Aon, which is a snake-like bubble of plasma, created a genome for the human race. And so basically created the genome, or the blueprint for our DNA, and then spread this blueprint throughout the galaxy, throughout one of the arms of the galaxy. Now, this Aon Sophia decided, she became completely in love with her experiment, and she became, in a way, she became relatively attached to her experiment, in such a way that this attachment caused her to fall from the center of the galaxy into the arms of the galaxy where the experiment was being developed. So she fell all the way from, quote unquote, the heavens, which is the core of the galaxy. So you can imagine this spike of plasma coming out of the center of the galaxy, going all the way to the third arm of the galaxy where Earth is. And in the process, so this was something like a spike of plasma that fell from the center of the galaxy, going outwards and reaching the third arm of the galaxy where we are now. Now, in the process of this fall, the Aon Sophia inadvertently created certain creatures. And these creatures are the Archons. So she created, without intention, she created a set of beings that have this appearance of a fetus, or an unformed fetus. So some people suggest that the appearance of these unformed fetus matches the description of the gray aliens. But as I said, researcher Robert Stanley suggested the view of the appearance of the fetus relates to these unformed blobs of energy that sits in dimensions parallel to ours, and they cannot attack us materially because they don't have a physical body, but they can attack us through the field of consciousness. We know that the whole universe is just one field of consciousness. So we are part of this field, and they are part of this field as well. So they can attack us. So they can try to influence us, and in a way that we destroy ourselves, because they cannot do that physically. They can influence what we know today as the Illuminati, for example, just so these guys can do the dirty work for them. So this is why, that's where the story about Satanism comes from, which is beings, demonic beings, that influence the way that you, or the way that anyone behaves, anyone that lends himself to this type of possession, to this type of influence. And these beings, these Archons, or these demonic spirits, whatever you want to call them, have the power to influence the way that you think, if you allow yourself to have low vibration thoughts and feelings and actions. So this is the deal that the Illuminati, the Freemasons have done. And in return for the possession of their bodies, these guys have material wealth. So you're talking about the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, and all of the slaves of the Archons. And this is the story as it goes today. So that's basically the story of the Archons. And as I said in the beginning, I would very happily say that this is just mythology. This is not really something that should be paid a lot of attention to, etc. But as John Lash suggests there is far more to that. So, for example, when you go into cosmology and astronomy, astronomers which are completely materialistic and completely bought by the materialistic view of the world, so the deep state has this hold on science, and only the people that do the bidding of the deep state, only these guys receive research grants, etc. So this is why every scientist is a materialist, because they need to toe the line of the Rothschilds. But even these guys, they have found some very interesting stuff. So, for example, have a look at this article there in the ZME Science journal. So, as I said, this is a completely materialistic science journal, and this article discusses how astronomers image plasma flares on the bleeding edge of Milky Way's supermassive black hole. So astronomers have discovered that the center of the galaxy is surrounded by plasma flares, or by clouds of plasma that have these snake-like format. So does that ring any bells to you? Well, when the Gnostics described the Aeons as being snakes of light, this is probably what they were describing. They didn't have the terminology, the scientific terminology that we have today. Just they didn't know what plasma was. They didn't know what a solar flare was. They didn't know what a black hole was. They didn't know that black hole could concentrate plasma around its edges. So they had to describe it somehow. So they did describe it as snake-like creatures of light, snake-like, god-like creatures of light. That's the best that they could do to describe it. Now we have our own materialistic astronomers from the mainstream science paid by the deep state, and even these guys are showing us these snake-like bubbles of plasma around the center of the galaxy. So this is precisely what the Gnostics described 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Is that a coincidence? Well, I leave that up to you. So this is that's the reference. So you feel free to go and do your own research. This is an article from October 31st, 2018. So this year, and I leave it up to you to do your own research and compare what the Gnostics said with what even the materialistic, paid off science is saying about what exists in the center of the universe. Now have a look at this other article here from Max Planck Gesellschaft. The article says the turbulent heart of the Milky Way. So the Milky Way is an agglomeration of plasma. Some people say that there could be a black hole in the middle of it. It's possible. But what the article describes, the article starts with who left the deep scars on the heart of our Milky Way. The deep scars on the heart of our Milky Way. So, and then they go in their hunt for elusive clues that might reveal the culprit. An international team of astronomers from the Max Planck Institute for Extraterrestrial Physics has been scouring cosmic images of the X-ray satellite XMM Newton. The prime suspect is the supermassive black hole, but a number of massive stars and supernovae do not appear entirely innocent either. So these again, this fits the idea that you do have objects in the center of the galaxy, and these objects, they do spike and they do fall out to the arms of the galaxy at some point, and this is precisely what the Archons, what the Gnostics have described in their archaic language. They didn't have the terms that we have today. They didn't have the science that we have today, but they described it in the best way that they could. So again, I leave that reference. You can take a screen print and go do do the research for yourself. And then the next topic is, hang on a second, how could someone, even if it is a godlike snake of plasma, how can that create life without intention? Is it possible? Is it BS? Is it? And then this would fall. This would be put in the too hard basket. It would probably be put in the mythology basket. So we could say, okay, now the Gnostics have gone overboard. So they're most likely making this up. No spurt of energy can create life, just out of nothing. That's impossible. And then you come across this article that was about a very interesting experiment that happened in 1837 by a man called Andrew Cross, C-R-O-S-S-E, Andrew Cross. So basically this guy was trying to form crystals by applying electricity to some raw materials. And the way that he did the experiment was described in the paper that he submitted to the Scientific Society, or to the London Electrical Society. And what happened was, when he started applying electrical currents to magnetic material, he noted that some bugs, some acari, and more specifically an insect type that was later called the Acarus crossi, which is exactly the one that you're seeing there. These beings were created seemingly out of nothing. So no one has any idea about how this was done. The materialists, they just shut their eyes, shut their ears, and say blah 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 blah. This is not true. This is not true. This is not true. But no one was able to explain what the hell happened over there. How did this guy, Andrew Cross, create life just out of an electric current, out of basically a type of plasma? So the idea is, of course, you could say, well, this has been done only once. Apparently this has been done only once. So you shouldn't pay a lot of attention to that. Maybe that's true. But the problem is that no one came to explain what happened back then. So the idea is that if this guy was indeed able to create life, and this is why it's called abiogenesis. It's called the abiogenesis of the Acarus. If you do the research yourself, you're going to find articles and articles about this abiogenesis of the Acarus insect. And basically what happens is that no one was able to explain how these bugs were created just by applying electricity to inert material. So if this is true, and I'm not claiming that it is, but if this is true, and if this indeed happened, it would show that the Gnostics were on the ball when they described the Archons, these primitive forms of intelligent life, as having been created unwittingly by the Aon, which is basically an electric current or a current of plasma, an intelligent current of plasma coming out of the center of the galaxy. So if we were able to create these bugs out of electricity, why do we doubt that a current of plasma, a snake of plasma, couldn't do the same thing? So this is really very intriguing, and it's worth further investigation. So I advise you to go and have a look at the work by John Lash. Now, he complains that a lot of the other researchers, including David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, Robert Stanley, and Jay Widener, etc., these guys discuss the role of the Archons without talking about Sophia. So basically what happened, and just continuing the story of Sophia, these Aeon fell in love with her creation, which is us, our DNA. And she fell from the center of the galaxy, and she formed the planet Earth and the sun and the moon. So that's what the Gnostics have suggested. And we live on the solidified body of the Aeon Gaia. So Gaia and Sophia, or Gaia and Sophia, are the same. So we live in the body of our goddess, of our creator. And this is why it's so beautiful. The whole thing is so beautiful. And this is why the Vatican, which is the mouthpiece for the Archons, for the demonic forces, the Vatican has been trying to deny the work of the Gnostics so much, because the Archons, they know that they are a cosmic fart. They know that they are unintended, and they envy humanity, because humanity, differently from the Archons, humanity was intended. Humanity is the result of a beautiful genetic experiment that came out of the center of the galaxy. So because of that, they hate us, the Archons hate us, and they want the worst possible outcome for humanity. Now, what happens is that the whole idea, the whole situation is now being cleared. It's now being, according to the Gnostics themselves and according to post-Gnostic or modern Gnostic information, the whole idea is being, or the whole situation is being corrected by forces coming out of the center of the galaxy as well. So there are forces coming out of the center of the galaxy that are helping contain the work of the Archons, and the Archons' days are numbered. So it was something like someone suggested, I think it was maybe even John Lash himself suggested that could be something like 100 Archons for every human on Earth. So you're looking at, let's say, 700 billion parasites living interdimensionally and trying to control your mind, trying to put ideas in your mind, and trying to put bad thoughts in your mind, trying to keep you fearful, trying to keep you angry and greedy. And every time that you do fall down to these low vibration emotions, you are doing the bidding of the Archons, and you're becoming just a slave, just like the Rothschilds are slaves. So the idea is that you should help Mother Gaia Sophia in combating the Archons. How do you do that? By developing love in your heart, by treating others in the same way that you would like to be treated yourself, by keeping a clear mind as to how valuable you are to the divine creator, and by being in touch with Earth, by being in touch and getting your energy, getting your vibrancy from the planet itself, because the planet itself is our godly mother, and we need to reconnect with her if we are going to understand the true essence of what we are. So this is the story for today. Again, I think that this adds to the confusion, because there's several different traditions. There's the Gnostics, the Law of One, the Buddhists. There is the genesis of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and there is the Vedas of Hindu tradition. So I think that the Gnostics story of the creation of humanity just adds to the confusion. But confusion is good. Confusion is healthy. Confusion means that you have an open and working consciousness, and it means that you're doing your work to develop your consciousness. You're not keeping your mind closed like one of these church dumbasses that decide to cut the head off anyone that thinks differently from them. So you are doing your homework. You are a worth human being, and you're open and you're looking for the answers. So thank you very much for watching. So please leave your messages, your comments down below, and I would be very grateful if you also came across, if you also suggested themes for new videos, and see you next time. God bless you.